Oh yes, the St. Louis Arch, with all of its fame and glory. Wait, what's this? Is this a pickup truck driving hill jack?
Yeah. Do the hill jack dance. Yeah. Do the hill jack dance. Yeah. Shoulder shrug, let's go. Yeah. Wash the window. Yeah. No, try more circular motion. No? Okay.
Child, please. How much Mountain Dew do you think this guy drank before his commute to work? You can't forget, this is the Midwest. Plus, it's only fitting to see this happen right in front of the Worldwide Technology Raceway, which is a NASCAR track right outside of East St. Louis. Well, with all of the hill-jackery and hood drama that goes on around here aside, you can't lie. The St. Louis Arch is quite a sight, right? And if you disagree, then you're probably someone who thinks the Grand Canyon is ugly too. I stopped and drove around East St. Louis this past summer while working on a much longer trip of driving Route 66 from Chicago to LA. It was a perfect morning with clear skies and nice visibility. Like really, there's like none of that brown or gray haze crap that you'll often see hanging around the air in these major cities. But if you've ever been up the St. Louis Arch, you'll know what a depressing sight it is on the other side of the river. When I took these drone shots, the orange glow of the sunrise kind of made everything look prettier than it is. Seeing East St. Louis during the golden hour is like putting a spray tan over the city. But as we get all up close and personal, and as the spray tan starts to fade away, you can start to see the real East St. Louis pretty quick. This was once again during the summer on a beautiful day. Like, the weather couldn't have been any better. That being said, it kind of felt like winter to me. It was such a cold feeling when driving through, with empty buildings scattered all over the place and vegetation taking over the empty blocks. I'm just speaking for myself, but it was a really sad and depressing feeling that I felt when driving through East St. Louis. I know that you all want to get on with the video and everything, yeah, whatever, but before we get too far, I'll give credit where credit is due. The city of East St. Louis has done a really nice job with their riverfront. I mean, there's only so much that you can do when there's a mega freeway blocking off the main part of town from the riverfront, and then of course you have railroad tracks going right along with the river, but the city of East St. Louis, at least, has put together a really nice park called Malcolm W. Martin Memorial Park, where you can climb an observation tower and get an amazing view of the St. Louis Arch. You also have the Gateway Geyser, which wasn't running when I was there, probably because I was there at the crack of dawn, but that's a beautiful addition to the park too. And lastly, you have the DraftKings at Casino Queen, which started as a riverboat casino in 1993, and then the giant building that you see here today was built in 2007. Now, some of you naysayers might say that that's not much of anything, but it's better than not having anything there, or having a giant brownfield site from a former industrial complex, which is probably what it was, so you can hate all you want, but it seems like the city is doing what it can to give people a reason to ever want to go to East St. Louis. Because, let's be honest, outside of the casino, and outside of the park that was built to complement the Gateway Arch, there's nothing worth your time to either do or see in East St. Louis. And if you don't live in East St. Louis, chances are that you're never going to set foot in town. Come on, don't lie. You know I'm right. Outside of the dozen or so that will show up in the comments section and say,
"Oh, I've been to East St. Louis and I've never lived there."
Yeah, the rest of you will never take the East St. Louis exit along the highway unless maybe you're not paying attention and it's too late before you realized that you never merged left to stay on the highway. That's right, you look up from your phone while you're texting and gossiping about your coworkers, or maybe you took a photo of the St. Louis Arch or the Mississippi River while crossing the bridge and you're posting it on Instagram. Yeah, you're doing something like that, but little did you know that all of a sudden you're heading down an exit ramp that's taking you straight into downtown East St. Louis. Oops. I mean, the point is that for most people, including people who live in the greater St. Louis region, even Metro East for that matter, there's no reason for most people to ever need to go to East St. Louis for anything. There are very few amenities in town, there's no major shopping center to bring people in, it's a dead town, really. Downtown is dead, most of the residential blocks are gone, There seems to be not a single properly working traffic light in town anymore. It's like the city gave up and made everything a four-way stop. There's plenty of old stretches of streets that are no longer drivable through town because the city can't afford to maintain them. And the city can't justify any reasoning to repair a street on a block that nobody lives on because the city is so cash-strapped, so they just put up barricades and allow nature to reclaim it all. Heck, the state even moved State Route 15 from its old route from continuing along Missouri Avenue to zigzag towards Broadway because the tallest building in town, the Spivey Building, has had bricks fall off of the main structure and then crash onto the sidewalk and street, making it a hazard to the public. More on the Spivey Building in just a few minutes. Anyway, it's safe to assume that the vast majority of the people who are driving on the streets in East St. Louis at any given time are likely the ones who still call the city home. No reason for anyone else to be here. Anyway, I'm here for a reason, and that's to tell you that this is the Broadview Hotel. It's one of the more historic buildings in East St. Louis. The building has been empty since 2004, or for 2 decades. When it was built, it was the largest hotel in what used to be a large growing city, but not so much anymore. Amenities in its heyday included a ballroom, a restaurant, a rooftop garden, although I hear that the rooftop garden is still there. Okay, anyway, this building was home to the studios for East St. Louis's first radio station, WTMV, in 1935. Later, the call letters changed to WAMV, but the last date on air for that powerhouse was 1964. Anyway, the hotel started to become an apartment building starting in the late 1940s and 50s. As the city continued to decline, in 1957, the hotel leased out space to Southern Illinois University. SIU ended up owning the building entirely in 1978, and the institution had control of it all the way until 2004, in which it's been abandoned ever since. However, you can see construction crews on site as I drove by in the summer of 2023. It was earlier that year that it was announced that there would be a $44 million redevelopment project of the building, making it the largest investment in East St. Louis since the Casino Queen in 1993. Hopefully that can turn out the way that everyone wants it to because, man, this town needs some good things happening to it for once. I mean, just look at this street. It's like this all throughout the quote-unquote business district of downtown East St. Louis. There are no signs of life anywhere that you look. And while we're looking at this, we're actually right at the corner of the Spivey Building. And there are no redevelopment plans for the Spivey Building, which is the tallest building in not only East St. Louis, but in all of the Metro East region. And if you're not from this area, Metro East is the name for the Illinois side of the St. Louis metro area. Anyway, the Spivey Building, just like with the Broadview Motel, it was also built in 1927. The 12-story skyscraper saw its last tenant move out in 1980, and that means that it's been sitting here completely vacant for about 43 to 44 years at the time of me uploading this video, if you don't want to do the math. There's plenty of videos online of YouTubers and now TikTokers who risk their lives to go inside and film what it looks like, and good for them because I'm never going to be doing that. But the Spivey Building has become a commanding image to illustrate East St. Louis's decline. So much so that it's a safety hazard for anyone walking or driving by along Missouri Avenue. As you can see, they have about a third of the width of the street blocked off for those reasons, as bricks continue to pile up along the sidewalk. And of course, you have a railroad crossing signal here that's flashing red when there's no train coming by at all, just like with all of the traffic lights in town that no longer function as an actual traffic light, rather a four-way stop. Anyway, it's easy to see what East St. Louis looks like nowadays through YouTube videos like mine or through Google Street View images or by coming here to see it for yourself maybe. It's really easy to see just how bad things have gotten, but let's now talk about why and how things have gotten to be so bad for the city. Well, in its heyday, East St. Louis was an industrial powerhouse, just like Gary, Indiana was, just like Detroit, Michigan was, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Erie, Pennsylvania, Cleveland, Ohio, and just like all of those places, East St. Louis became a rustbelt city. Now, East St. Louis had a significant advantage being located across the river from St. Louis, of course, but what you may not know is that back then, St. Louis was one of the nation's 5 largest cities. In fact, St. Louis was the 4th largest city in the country from 1900 to 1910. It was larger than Baltimore, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh. St. Louis was pretty significant, at least a lot more so than it's considered to be today. Anyway, this was all during the railroad era. St. Louis was a major transportation hub, not only because it was along the Mississippi River, but also because it was a huge junction for the busy railroad lines that headed west in the United States during the Western expansion. There were as many as 27 railroad lines that had their western terminus in East St. Louis. That's a crazy amount of railroad lines, and it helps illustrate just how much of a key transportation hub this region was during the railroad era, because with all of that traffic heading through on the railroads, and with the Mississippi River, this region was able to see significant industrial growth. The first modern settlement on the land that we know today as the city of East St. Louis was established back in 1765, but with all of the railroads that were built in the 19th century, by 1892, East St. Louis had quite a few established iron and steel plants. That being said, some historians refer to East St. Louis as being the Pittsburgh of the West. Other factories in town produced railroad materials, oil, glass, meat packing, chemicals, zinc processing, and aluminum ore processing. By 1906, there were even more industries in town, including the production of trucks, cars, car springs, stoves, locomotives, railroad spikes, nails, forges, stamp mill forges, ironware, machinist tools, rolling mills, frogs and switches, glassware, aluminum products, glucose, cottonseed oil, barrels, car roofs, fireworks, fertilizers, structural iron, breweries, white lead, yeast cakes. What the heck is that? I don't know. Paint, baking powder, breakfast food, stockyards, and I think I mentioned it all. Yeah, I think I did. Anyway, the peak years for East St. Louis being an industrial powerhouse lasted from 1890 to around 1930, or the Great Depression. In 1920, the city ranked number 1 in the country in the sales of horses and mules, and the city was home to the largest aluminum processing center in the world. The city also led the country in the manufacturing of baking powder, roofing materials. It had the cheapest coal in the world, and it was the leader in manufacturing paint pigments. During this era, it seemed as if the industrial growth would never hit a ceiling in East St. Louis. With all of the industry, of course, came people who were looking for work. There were a lot of freed slaves from the southern states that made their way to East St. Louis to work in the factories. Other immigrant groups flocked to East St. Louis from southern and eastern Europe. East St. Louis saw such a population boom that the number of residents doubled each decade. Here you can see the exact census counts over time for the city. The rapid population growth meant that housing was needed, and it was needed fast. This resulted in a lot of smaller homes being built throughout the grid streets of East St. Louis that were just big enough to house the factory workers and their families. During the early 1900s, however, racial tensions built up as the black population increased. That's just how society was back then, and no, it's nothing like the issues that we might see today. Anyway, July 2nd, 1917 marked the beginning of the East St. Louis race riots, aka the East St. Louis Massacre, which stemmed from unionized workers at the factories. Basically, the white folks in town at the time had a large political difference with the newer large black population, and things got really heated. During this dark time in the city, the riots led to the destruction of $400,000 worth of property, which is equal to almost $10 million in today's day and age. The riots also caused the fatalities of 9 white people and 39 black people. After the riots, the city continued to be a huge industrial powerhouse for the next couple of decades. However, in the mid-20th century, the city started to take a turn for the worst. Crime was at an all-time high, prostitution and gambling were rampant, and there were multiple corrupt city leaders over time that all contributed towards East St. Louis's decline. not to mention the deindustrialization that hit the entire country, which counted for tens of thousands of lost jobs in East St. Louis. From 1960 to 1970, the city lost nearly 70% of its businesses, which took a huge toll on the tax revenue that funded the city's budget. Around the 60s and 70s, people started to leave town just as quickly as they came into town during the early part of the 20th century. And to finish it off simply, East St. Louis has never been able to escape its own economic downward spiral. And now, after about 70 years of decline for East St. Louis, the entire Metro East region is seeing the same effect. The state of Illinois is not doing its struggling communities any favors by imposing some of the highest property taxes in the nation. This 2022 story by KSDK explained how a family moved from the Metro East community of Dupo to a South County suburb, and their lone reasoning for making the move? Yeah, you guessed it, the property tax bill. It was so much lower in Missouri. So much so that they could afford twice as big of a house in Missouri than they could in Illinois. The article goes on to explain how Metro East had lost over 20,000 residents between 2010 and 2020. And keep in mind that that was during a decade where metro areas all across this country were seeing growth, unlike what we're seeing post-pandemic, where a lot of the metro areas in our country are losing population. Well, now let's go over the economic stats for East St. Louis. The city hit a peak population of 82,000 in 1950, but today, it's home to an estimated 17,900 people. That's a loss of population as big as 78%. That's just unheard of, even for Rust Belt towns. The median household income is an extremely low $28,000 per year, with only 12% of adults 25 and older holding a bachelor's degree or higher. The median value of owner-occupied housing units is $55,000, and the poverty rate is 31.6%. You can see right next to it how the numbers stack up for the entire greater St. Louis area. Meanwhile, this is Collinsville Avenue, which is supposed to be the city's main street, but in all reality, it's just a disaster everywhere you look. Towards the end of this video, we'll see the rest of Collinsville Avenue through its journey in downtown East St. Louis, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Anyway, the crime rates in East St. Louis... Oh, you want to know what the crime rates are in East St. Louis? Yeah, okay, I'll show you. They are really actually not that bad at all anymore. For years, East St. Louis was one of the more dangerous cities in the country, but over the last handful of years, the crime rate in East St. Louis has taken a sharp nosedive, which is a great thing for the city. And you know what? Maybe people will start realizing that, and maybe, just maybe, the city will have a chance to turn things around for the better. Or maybe not. We'll just have to wait and see. Looks like there's actually a train this time. That was the Metrolink that you just saw, which is the St. Louis area's mass transit line. There's actually 4 different Metrolink stations in East St. Louis, despite the town having only 17,000 residents anymore. And even though I talked about the declining crime rate, you might want to be careful riding the Metrolink in East St. Louis, because back in July of this year, a 23-year-old man shot and killed someone while riding the Metrolink in East St. Louis. That being said, it is true that the crime rates are down quite a bit in East St. Louis despite its reputation. Things were so bad here for so long that it's going to take that long of a time before people are going to realize that the crime has actually improved here. Over the last 4 years, East St. Louis has seen a 31% decline in homicides. So hopefully things can continue to improve in this town as time goes on. As you can see, lowering the crime rate is just one of the many issues that the city of East St. Louis faces if it's trying to make a legit comeback. There's a lot of land in this city that is either abandoned or it's just vacant land at this point. So in order for things to actually turn around, there's going to have to be some money. There's going to have to be some tax revenue generated. People are going to have to want to move back into town, and there needs to be companies that set up shop in town. But until then, you can't really expect much to happen in East St. Louis. But lowering the crime rate, that's a huge start. Well, I drove around East St. Louis for almost an hour on this summer morning, but I'm not going to show all of it in this video, so if you enjoyed this video and you're curious to see some other areas of East St. Louis, make sure to subscribe to my second channel called Chris Harden's Travel Archives, where I'll upload a second video that shows all of the footage that I filmed while in East St. Louis but didn't use in this video. Also, make sure to check out some of my older videos on East St. Louis, as this is actually my third time in town, so down below I'll have links to some of my older videos as well. And towards the end of this video, I'll be giving East St. Louis a Chris livability score, and I'll wrap it up with some final thoughts, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm going to continue driving around East St. Louis to see what more of the city looks like. Well, people, it is now that time. You can't always trust the corrupt East St. Louis city leaders, and you can't always trust a city-owned parking meter, but you can always trust Chris's livability score. The East St. Louis School District, probably not too much of a surprise to most of my viewers, is among the worst performing school districts in the state of Illinois and in the nation. That's common for a school district when 1/3 of the population that it serves is under the poverty line. The school district serves portions of neighboring communities such as Cahokia Heights and Washington Park, both of which are very East St. Louis-y in many ways. U.S. News reports that 0% of students at East St. Louis High School are proficient in math, only 1% in reading, and only 5% in science. Education gets a 2 out of 20. Crime is next, and you have to give credit where credit is due. It's not as bad here as it used to be, although there's still a strong negative reputation that the city has to overcome. It gets a 10 out of 20. Downtown looks miserable. There's absolutely nothing there other than a nightclub and a bank that gets robbed every so often. It gets a 1 out of 20. The economy of East St. Louis is terrible. I don't have to explain, just look around. It gets a 2 out of 20. The only bright spot is that it's within a larger metro area that has plenty of high-paying jobs, but nobody who works at those high-paying jobs ever sets foot into East St. Louis, so the city never sees the benefit of that part of the region's economy. Next is recreational opportunities, as East St. Louis, despite being reclaimed by nature, lacks in many recreational opportunities. Sure, you have the Mississippi River, but the Mississippi River is more so geared towards industrial usage in the area of East St. Louis and downtown St. Louis. There's a few golf courses in the area, but otherwise you have to drive quite a ways until you get to some legit recreational opportunities, so that gets a 3 out of 20. History is one of the stronger categories, as you can imagine, for this town. You could talk about the story of East St. Louis for days before it gets to be uninteresting. It gets a 17 out of 20. The next category is amenities. And outside of liquor and dollar stores, a few nightclubs, and the casino, there's nothing here. It gets a 3 out of 20. Cost of living is last. And to nobody's surprise, this category is going to score the highest. Outside of the insane property taxes imposed on the residents of East St. Louis, it's not expensive to live here at all. It gets a 19 out of 20. All in all, the Chris livability score for East St. Louis, Illinois is 57 out of 160, putting it in third to last place out of all of the cities that I've done this for so far. Only Pahokee and South Bay, Florida, which are neighboring cities in South Florida, rank lower than East St. Louis. Final thoughts here is, just like many of you, I thought for damn sure that East St. Louis was going to be ranked dead last on my Chris livability score list, but the history and cost of living categories saved its rear end from being dead last. The crime was also ranked a 10 out of 20 instead of something lower, so that helped too. But look, really it's just sad to see a town like this in the United States of America. And there's quite a few of them, but you know, East St. Louis has a lot in common with other blue-collar Rust Belt cities. It relied heavily once on various manufacturing industries. That's how the city grew to be how big it was. And nearly every city in this country that relied just as heavily on the manufacturing industry as East St. Louis did has seen a sharp decline. However, East St. Louis might have seen the sharpest decline of all of the Rust Belt cities. I mean, come on. Losing 78% of your peak population? Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that. 22% more and you're at 100%. It would be fascinating to see what happens with this city 100 years from now. I mean, seriously, I'm so curious as to what this place would look like in a century. Will YouTube be around for that long to see my video and the handful of others who have made videos on East St. Louis? Hopefully so, because that way future generations can look back at videos like this and see what it used to be like. Well, with that said, I do end the video here. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my second channel, where I'll have a video uploaded on there, and I'll show you more of what I saw on my drive around East St. Louis on this summer morning. Also, make sure to do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell and select yes, so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos with amazing insights on other places like what you saw here can be found in my Metro East playlist, my St. Louis Suburbs playlist, my Mississippi River Cities and Towns playlist, or in my American Hoods playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. We'll see you next time. Peace!